Full house.
Going to call to order the town board meeting for Monday, March the 9th, at time being 7 p.m. Ms. Eicher, will you please take roll call?
Mayor Christy Melendez.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ken Bennett.
Here.
Miles Baker.
Here.
Barry Wilson.
Here.
Paul Rennemeyer.
Here.
Tom Jones.
Here.
David Sislowski.
Here.
And as we have an esteemed past town board member with us this evening, Mr. Ivan Adams, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our next item this evening is a review of agenda by the board and addition of items of new business to the agenda for consideration.
Madam Mayor, if I may?
Yes.
On the agenda itself, in section C on board actions, I would propose that we swap items 3 and 4 so that we would be hearing the findings of fact, and as item 4 before we approve the annexation, and currently item 3. So switch those to 4 becoming 3, 3 becoming 4.
Okay. With that amendment to the agenda, Mr. McCarger?
Is that a motion, Mr.?
Yes.
Yes, we have a motion on the floor. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sislowski to amend the agenda with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the agenda is approved as amended. Moving on then this evening, we have special guests with us. I'm going to be reading a special proclamation. And then we'll be going down to greet them all, pass out a special little Windsor tribute, and then we'll be taking some photos. So with that, I'd like to read this special proclamation. Whereas the Windsor Wizards High School wrestling team has shown continued success, placing first in the Colorado High School Activities Association 4A state tournament in Denver on Saturday, February 22nd, 2020, and earning our local team its 4th title in the school history. Whereas the Windsors finished 5 for 5 in their final matches at the Pepsi Center and won their 2nd title in 3 years with 190 points. Whereas, in addition to the team accomplishment, 2 Windsor High School seniors, Dominic Serrano and Isaiah Salazar, each won their 4th state titles, the first time in Colorado's history that 2 wrestlers from the same school have a perfect state title record in the same season. Before I continue, would you, those 2 young men, please stand, because I think they deserve a round of applause. Thank you. Whereas Windsor High School senior Dominic Serrano defeated his opponent 32-8 in his last match, making him the 2nd Weld County wrestler to earn 4 state titles and the 2nd Colorado high school wrestler to hold an undefeated season with a record of 168-0. Whereas Windsor High School senior Isaiah Salazar became the 3rd Weld County wrestler to earn 4 state titles with a career record of 143-6. Whereas the 1st place finish wouldn't have been possible without a fantastic team effort, with several additional Windsor High School students also earned their places on the podium at the Colorado State Championship, including additional championship winners Vance Bombar, did I pronounce that right? Cody Eaton, Tristan Perez, and podium finishers John Kenny, Vincent Fortin Munez, and Jake Trusty. Whereas team head coach Monty Trusty and assistant coaches Milo Trusty, Ben Sherrington, Vinny Gonzalez, Josh Grasmick, and Dick Thomas have instilled the character values of hard work, perseverance, teamwork, and dedication in the hearts and souls of their players. Whereas student participation in athletics and activities result in great character qualities, including patience, persistence, dedication, and teamwork, and are a source of community pride. Whereas, according to ChasaNow.com, saying Windsor's wrestling team illustrated perfection in the Class 4A State Wrestling Championship on Saturday isn't hyperbole, it's a fact. And whereas, by recognizing the Windsor High School wrestling team and coaches as community representatives, the town of Windsor acknowledges their continued efforts and this amazing accomplishment. Now therefore, be it resolved that I, Mayor of Windsor, Christy Melendez, a Windsor Wizard graduate, and your Windsor Town Board take pride in proclaiming Tuesday, March 10th, 2020 as Windsor Day of Champions, with encouragement for all citizens to acknowledge and recognize the importance of activity and athletic participation as a benefit to the community. Dated the 9th day of March 2020. And with that, would our guests please stand so we can give you a round of applause. So truly, it is a true accomplishment, and it is great pride that we have this evening to be able to personally congratulate these fine young men. As I said when I was there and saw them giving the big championship trophy to the high school on Friday, I have had the privilege of being in the White House and meeting the Vice President. I have met both our state senators. But tonight is even more special because these are hopefully our young and up-and-coming young leaders that will take on in our community, in our state, and in our country the next of what is to come. So, and certainly they have shown that if they believe and they follow their pursuits, they can achieve. And so with that, we congratulate them, and so let's go down and come through. You guys can be in charge of those hours that come by. And then we'll let you guys come by so you can shake everybody's hand, and then we'll line y'all up for a photo. Congratulations.
Great work, man.
I think he's gonna, I don't know, yeah, probably. Is this thing moving?
You almost got two.
Do we want to in front?
I can get you a second one if you really want to. And congratulations. Thank you. Congrats. Hey, congrats, man.
You guys may
With that hat. It's a sweet shirt, dude. Hey, congratulations.
And I'm sure that I get to be
Good work, Coach. Thank you.
All right. On three. 1, 2, 3. And one more. 1, 2, 3. Perfect, you guys. Thank you.
Successes to you all. Okay, thank you. So with that, we will continue with our agenda, and we're on to our board liaison reports. Town Board Member Baker, Tree Board and Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you. I have no update this evening.
Town Board Member Wilson, Parks, Recreation, Culture Advisory Board, Poudre River Trail Corridor.
For the Poudre River Trail, I want to encourage people to go to poudretrail.org. You can sign up for a newsletter. You can also sign up for a trail conditions report. We did have our meeting for the Parks, Recreation, and Culture, where the staff members gave our citizen board a tour of the new facility out at Public Works to see now that everyone has all moved in. So that was pretty fascinating. So if you ever get a chance to see, we have a state-of-the-art facility that I think any city or town in the state of Colorado would be proud to work out of. We also reviewed the strategic plan that this board saw in a work session and we'll see again in the future. We reviewed the public art master plan, which is part of the packet this evening. If anyone wants to take a look, that's exciting, especially with the new public art we recently added, thanks to Martin Lind out at the roundabout at 7th and New Liberty. And then there was a brief update on the Future Legends Sports Park as well that is still moving forward.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, Water and Sewer Board.
Water and Sewer Board will meet this Wednesday morning.
Okay. Town Board Member Rennemeyer, Chamber of Commerce.
We had a big development actually occur within the last week. The Chamber President and CEO of the Windsor Chamber of Commerce resigned last Thursday. His final day with the Chamber has not been fully established yet, as we have a full regularly scheduled Chamber of Commerce board meeting this Wednesday. So I'll know more at our next board meeting as to how that went.
Okay. Town Board Member Jones, Windsor Housing Authority and Great Western Trail Authority.
Windsor Housing Authority will meet next week, the regular meeting. They do have an item on the agenda under communications regarding the site plan for the new Golden Meadows Senior Complex. The Great Western Trail Authority, 5 years after receiving our grant to complete the trail between Severance and Eaton, we'll be advertising for bids tomorrow to start that process. And hopefully, as I've mentioned before, we'll have construction underway by June 1st.
Town Board Member Sislowski, Clearview Library Board and Planning Commission.
Mayor and audience, the nothing report on the library board, that's meeting later this month, the last Thursday of the month. Planning Commission was held Wednesday, and the primary matter that they reviewed was the land use revisions that were forwarded to us for review this evening. That's all.
Okay. I don't have anything from the last DDA report that I gave. However, I do have a report from North Front Range MPO that had a meeting on March the 5th. So one of the items was approved. The MPO staff requested approved two funding for two projects, and that was adding the expansion of the mobility program project with $600,000 to the multimodal options fund. That is to fund our one call, one click project which we are also getting hopefully a matching grant for that project of another $600,000 to secure that project for 3 years. For those who don't know what One Call, One Click will someday be, it will be the place and space when you need a ride or to get transportation, you would call and you would tell them what your needs are, where you have to go, and instead of having to monitor and navigate that by yourself, they would help you figure out all the sources and where you go and the rides that you can get. We also funded $125,000 for the through the Multimodal Options Fund for what's called the North Front Range Premium Transit Analysis to do some additional transit analysis for all of northern Colorado. We also approved in that analysis, one of the things that they'll be talking about is the work task that makes funds available to the North Front Range MPO. We want to develop an analysis of upgraded premium transit connecting major origin and destinations in addition to corridors identified in the 2045 Regional Transit Plan. The North Front Range region is growing quickly with new jobs and households, and transit can help address commuter and mobility needs. The 3 largest cities in the region have local transit, but there are limited options between communities and within smaller communities. In addition, the North Front Range MPO wants to be prepared to connect local communities to those investments in bus staying and other statewide transit initiatives. The other thing we got to see was we did get an infusion of about $5.5 million of one-time funding to fund some multimodal projects, and so we heard from all of the projects, and as we know, Windsor is a recipient of one of those projects. We are getting some funding for the 7th Street multimodal study and early action plan, so that was good to see that and see all the other projects that are happening as well. And with that kind of concludes, I think, all of the highlights of the North Front Range meeting. Moving on then to item 6. Item 6 is the opportunity for public invited to be heard. Did we have anybody? Okay, is there anybody who wished to address the board on a non-agenda item? This would be the time to come forward. Okay, seeing none, we will move forward then with item B, the consent calendar. Under the consent calendar this evening, we have 2 items, report of the bills from February 2020 and resolution number 2020-17.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve the consent calendar as presented this evening.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Wilson approving the consent calendar as presented. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the consent calendar is approved as presented unanimously. Moving on then to board action item C. Our first item this evening is resolution number 2020-18. A resolution approving the W Entertainment District. Legislative action, and Ms. Humphreys will give presentation. Ms. Humphreys.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Board. Before you tonight is a submitted application to create an entertainment district within the town of Windsor. Dr. Patrick Weekland with the Windsor Entertainment District here is to present that. But before he does, I'd just like to give you a few brief some information here. The proposed entertainment district contains approximately 23,000 square feet of licensed premise space between Hart Distillery and High Hops Brewery, and the total size of the proposed entertainment district will be approximately 10 acres. That is key to remember because criteria you must have is 20,000 square feet or more of combined space and less than 100 acres. So he is within that criteria. Please note, since his original submittal of the application, the name of the entertainment district has been updated to W Entertainment District. In accordance with Chapter 6, Article 5 of the Municipal Code, the Town Board shall review each application for an entertainment district and authorize its creation by resolution, which shall be subject to annual review and is revocable at the will of the Town Board. After this entertainment district has been created, the town board delegates to the Liquor Licensing Authority all decisions relating to promotional associations, common consumption areas, and the regulation of attached premises to common consumption areas, as these relate to location, size, security, and hours of operation pursuant to Colorado law. And with that, I'll have Dr. Weekland come up.
Okay.
Good evening. Thanks for hearing me out here today. Look forward to getting this going. Pat Weekland, 6461 Highway 392, Windsor. You guys have any questions?
Are there any questions? Dr. Jones?
Hi, Pat.
Hi.
I just have a couple of questions here. Regarding the application, I notice your house is surrounded by the entertainment district.
Yes.
I guess that doesn't concern you too much.
No,
No.
does not. It was
Okay.
that was a whole story in its own. Yeah, we chose to keep the house out of the entertainment district for security and safety and all kinds of rule issues. So the house is not part of the entertainment district. And I don't live there,
Oh, you don't?
no.
Oh, I know that. How about restrooms? Are you going to need additional restrooms for that kind of acreage?
The restroom, if we have a festival or event that requires more people than what we have inside, then we'll definitely have some porta potties that come out, and that's yes, that we'll take care of mobile bathrooms as needed.
Okay, and can you tell me one, in your application, you talk about tips training. Can you tell me what that is?
So the state and the federal government, the TTB, the Tobacco and Trade organizations that monitor and license bars and people who serve alcohol require you. It's not really a super requirement, but it's expected of you, especially if there's a liability issue. So it's training by it's advanced training to notice the sobriety and to be able to acknowledge when somebody has had too much to drink, or when to not serve people, or when to serve people alcohol, and when to cut them off, and how to treat them in a professional manner. And each of our employees, before they are allowed to serve alcohol, have to be TIPS trained. And TIPS is just, I'm not sure what the abbreviation stands for, but it's an acronym for something. There's several different professional organizations that train individuals in the bar industries, and TIPS is one of them.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes. Thanks, that's all I have.
Additional questions? Mr. Kozlowski?
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Weekland, Dr. Weekland, we have, in the packet, we have a map of your land, and I
Yeah.
think I don't know if we can put it up, but there's a highlighted yellow area, which I believe is the W district, correct?
Yes.
Is the western edge of that really the western edge of your current facility with
The red line indicates our property boundaries.
right?
And the yellow line. So within our facility, let me just give you a little rundown of the facility, of what we're trying to do and why we're trying to do it. I didn't do that at the beginning. So what we want to do is to create an area where the Hart Distillery and the brewer and High Hops Brewery can commingle drinks, so that we get questions every night from 50% of the people: why can't we bring our alcohol into the bar? Why can't we bring our beer into this over here? And it's really not our deal. What it is, this bar has this license and this bar has this license. You can't take your drink from this guy's bar over to this guy's bar, period. That's just the law, and we try to enforce that. But what this will allow us to do is to commingle the alcohol in a controlled environment, where we have set up the lines and put up hard barriers, not this tape barrier, but hard barriers with fences. And this whole perimeter around the facility is 10 acres. We have gates and pipe fence that surrounds the entire property. Within that, there's fences also. Within the garden center, that's primarily 99% of the time where the entertainment common consumption areas will be, is out on the patio or inside the garden area, in the beer garden and the greenhouse. That's where we can control and monitor the people that are using the common consumption area. We will still have 2 separate licensed areas where you can't have commingling, where we have the Hart Distillery's licensed area and High Hops Brewery area, which is licensed for beer only, and the other one is licensed for spirits only. But in the main areas where we have it roped off and secured with fences, that will be the common consumption areas. So this area in this yellow, it's huge. We want to ask for the sky in case something happens, that we want to have this amazing opportunity presents itself. We want to be able to say, yes, we can have that at the W Entertainment District and bring some amazing things to this town. And we're creating a world-class facility here. There is no other facility that I am aware of in the whole country that has a distillery, a brewery, a garden center, and a hop field with an unobstructed view of the mountains. And I think that with you guys allowing us to keep pushing the way we are, we can make this thing even greater than it is. And I appreciate your help.
Just to follow on, so if I understand you, in the yellow area,
Yep.
people will be able to, one person walking with a beer in their hand, the other one with a gin and tonic in their hand, they'll be able to go anywhere within that yellow area and stroll?
Yes. So what we've done inside this area, and this was, I kind of wanted to show, have you guys come out and show you what we're trying to accomplish. Like I said, 99% of the time, it will not be in this whole area. It will be in the patio area or the inside that beer garden, which is well secured with hard fences. Outside of this area, if we have a big festival, yes, they will be able to do that. It will be roped in. There'll be security guards around. We will have porta potties. We'll have food vendors, the lights. We'll continue to maintain the professionalism and the security that we are already doing out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any additional questions? I think my question would be for Ms. Humphries. What is the length of this application once granted? Is it in perpetuity, or do they have to come back and renew every so often, or?
I'm actually just kind of a neutral party to help shepherd Mr. Weekland to the dais, as Crystal's up here with you, and Kim Emil is our prosecuting attorney, so she might have to do something for that. I'm going to defer to Ian on this one.
Mr. McCarver, do you know?
So once you're done with this, assuming you approve this, the next step is it goes to the Liquor Authority. And the Liquor Authority will really get down into the details of the common consumption area and the other requirements under the statute. From there, there's an annual review of the entity that is required to run the common consumption area. And so I would say that the application is potentially permanent, but there's an annual review by the Liquor Authority to ensure that the criteria that are established in the statute are followed year to year.
Okay, so once we approve this, the clawback does not rest with this board. It would rest with the Liquor License Authority if there was ever any issues.
It's both.
Oh, okay.
And we set it up that way. Every applicant for approval of an entertainment district understands that the Windsor Town Board creates the district and has the ability to uncreate the district. In addition, the licensing requirements that the Liquor Authority is going to establish and supervise are yet other grounds that the applicant will have to comply with. So you do retain the absolute right to revoke the entertainment district, whether or not the Liquor Authority takes some action on their criteria. So it's both, and we set it up that way deliberately because we wanted to make certain that once you created a district, you didn't completely wash your hands of it. You still have the ability to regulate it as a legislative matter, and that's what this is.
Okay. Any final follow-up questions? Mr. Redemeyer?
I was just gonna mention really quick, I looked this up in our packet, there's actually a link in there, the TIPS that you were talking about, the training, it actually stands for Training for Intervention Procedures is the acronym. It's the global leader in education and training for the responsible service, sale, and consumption of alcohol. Proven effective by third-party studies, TIPS is a skill-based training program that is designed to prevent intoxication, underage drinking, and drunk driving. So that's what they have to.
You got that now? You want to repeat it?
Thank you.
Gettips.com is the web address. So.
Okay. Any further comments from the applicant?
I just really appreciate you guys allowing us to have the opportunity to create this district, and I look forward to working with the town continuous. You guys rock, and I'm looking forward to many good years working with the city in the town of Windsor.
So with that, if there's no further questions or comments, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move for approval of resolution number 2020-18.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Doc Jones and a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett approving Resolution 2020-18. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution carries unanimously. Moving on to item 2, a public hearing. A public hearing, ordinance number 2020-1602, an ordinance approving the Overland 368 annexation to the town of Windsor. So I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer and a second from Mr. Baker to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now opened. Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Board. This annexation before you this evening has been reviewed in accordance with Article 1, Chapter 15 of the Municipal Code. The subject property is located northwest of Windsor Lake and Lake Osterhout, between State Highway 257 and 15th Street. The applicant has submitted a petition to annex the 173 acres into the town with a zoning of residential mixed use, or RMU. They've also submitted a master plan application and a rezoning application to create a planned unit development, or PUD, overlay. The land use plan in the comprehensive plan designates the property as single-family residential, and the proposed RMU designation is consistent with that designation. Surrounding properties are largely undeveloped agricultural lands. The town's public works and parks and open space facility is to the west. Property to the south is again agricultural, with a number of farm-type farmhouses included in those properties. The comprehensive plan growth strategy does include the property within what's called a secondary growth area, and that is described as land that lies outside the primary growth area. It includes areas within the town's boundaries and the growth management area. Development of these sites will require careful planning to ensure that newly annexed areas can be serviced by town infrastructure. The annexation plat before you shows the boundaries of the plat. More useful to understanding the proposal, though, is the master plan. So 257 would be on the right, 15th on the left. The proposed master plan includes 691 dwelling units, and I do want to point out that number is consistent with the land use plan at 4 units per acre and the sewer capacity, which was based off that 4 units per acre calculation. The master plan shows a mix of single family and attached units. There's a 12-acre school site on the easternmost portion of the property, approximately 7.5 acres of roads. The development would include the completion of County Road 70 to serve the property. There are approximately 44 acres of open space and drainage tracks, including an open space corridor and drainage corridor running through the site. That would also include open space amenities, trail, and things of that nature. The illustrative master plan provided by the applicant better shows that open space corridor running through the site. There would also be a town trail which connects 15th Street and 257 running through the property. The property is not currently served by Windsor sewer or water service, so future development would require extension of those utilities, and that would be the responsibility of the developer to extend those services with possibility of town reimbursement for any oversizing of those facilities. An annexation report has been prepared and is in the packet materials, further outlining the proposal, including a statement from the school district. The applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting in February of last year, and a summary of that meeting is enclosed as well. The notification area for the proposal was done in conformance with the municipal code, as well as the Colorado Annexation Act of 1965. The town board did adopt resolutions setting these public hearing dates, March 4th for the Planning Commission, and obviously tonight, March 9th for town board. The proposal is in general conformance with the comprehensive plan. Some of the key items are maintaining character as well as accommodating future growth that's fiscally and environmentally responsible. The proposal is consistent with that goal in providing open space and a variety of housing types. The municipal code also, the comprehensive plan also talks about new neighborhoods adjacent to the town core. This proposal is a little over a mile from downtown, so it is fairly close to the core of town. The plan also talks about diverse housing to meet the varying needs of family styles, lifestyles, and incomes. And again, the master plan and associated PUD do call for a diversity of housing sizes with multifamily, and then a range of single-family lot sizes, small as 2,500 square feet up to 6,600 square feet for those single-family lots. The proposal also does increase multimodal connectivity with connection of County Road 70 as well as the town trail through the property. And as already mentioned, the proposal would foster a diversity of housing types. Infrastructure would be extended in accordance with the goals and objectives of the comprehensive plan. The proposal is also consistent with the strategic plan. Again, the infrastructure being extended, quality of life, the 12-acre school site, open space, and regional trail would all contribute positively towards the quality of life. And then downtown, the site being approximately a mile from downtown, should only help increase demand and investment of downtown businesses. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, petition, supplemental materials, any testimony received, staff memo, supporting documents, and recommendation. At their March 4th, 2020 meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the annexation and zoning designation, subject to any outstanding Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed. And we'll come back to the master plan recommendation on a future or upcoming agenda item. And then lastly, the annexation master plan review considerations. Just as a reminder, annexation is a discretionary act. The proposal is in compliance with the Annexation Act of 1965, as well as the comprehensive plan. And that's all I have on this agenda item. Thank you.
Okay.
Questions for Mr. Hornbeck with regards to this?
Is the applicant going to be, coming up and presenting?
The applicant's present. I don't know if you wanted to make any presentation or statement.
My name is Eric Steidel, 9750 County Road 78, Fort Collins. I'm the applicant. I represent the property owner, which is my mother sitting back there. I don't have a presentation beyond what Paul had presented, but we're available with, if you have any questions, I have our team here, the architect and the engineers.
Okay. Did you have a question, Dr.
I
Jones?
did have a couple of questions. Maybe the architect
Okay.
be more appropriate.
Good evening. My name is Julia Melissos from WHA.
Well,
Hello.
just a couple of questions.
Sure.
The right-of-way for County Road 70, has that been dedicated for some time now historically by the county, or was there ever anything in the...
I don't believe right-of-way's been dedicated yet, and if you look closely, you probably notice the right-of-ways, the majority of it, or maybe even all of it, is off-site of this property. It's slightly to the north on the what's known as Takankala, and so there would need to be coordination between that property owner and this development to get that dedicated.
Okay, so the county wouldn't be involved in that realignment or anything like that?
Correct, it'd be up to the town.
Okay. And then in your neighborhood meeting, I saw someone ask a question about water service, and the answer was Greeley, but I assume that was incorrect?
They were saying that water service would be served by Greeley?
That was the answer at the neighborhood meeting.
No, the town will provide water service to that annexation.
Okay,
at
I
that
just
time.
wanted to make sure there wasn't any discrepancy there between the two.
It's likely that it was just a typing what it was being said, so it might have just been through the shorthand of the communications written.
Okay. And then my last question is regarding the trail.
Yes.
You show the trail. I assume your objective is to hook up with the number 2 ditch trail?
Are you referring to the trail through the channel? Would that
Yes.
through the open space area?
Yeah, and it looks like it, there's a piece that would connect over to the number 2 ditch trail. However, it looks like that piece goes through an adjacent property owner's property. And I wondered if there'd been any discussions with the adjacent property owner regarding that piece?
So the trails master plan shows a trail paralleling the railroad tracks. So you're right, the number 2 is in close proximity to this property. But there is not necessarily a plan to connect directly to it. As you mentioned, there is another property owner involved, and if that property developed, there'd certainly be that opportunity. We left it somewhat open-ended of not necessarily requiring it along the railroad tracks. If there's perhaps a better way to get it through the site, through that open space corridor, that could be acceptable as well. But those details will be worked out with the subdivision planning.
Okay, the railroad tracks, you say there is a trail there as well, or that was considered?
The Trails Master Plan shows it there, but town park staff is open to the idea of shifting it into this green belt. And that would be figured out in the future.
Because along the railroad track, it wouldn't really connect to anything, would it?
Well, there's a soft surface trail, or kind of soft surface that was put in with the town's public works facility. It doesn't really connect anywhere yet either. So it wouldn't connect anywhere on the south, again, as you hit another property owner. So it might make more sense for that investment to be through that open space and just connecting 15th to 257 with future connections coming later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? Mr. Soslowski?
Go ahead. Thank you. Since you're there, could you go to the page prior? That, on that map. I tried to make sense of that. I think I understand the black dashed line is a road. And then there's the wavy line through the green space that is something.
So the thick dashed line that you're seeing is the match line. It's just really showing how the site plan is split up through the different pages of the plan set. The wavy line that you see through the center of the open space is actually the drainage channel that travels through the site.
That's not a trail.
No, but what would happen is, ideally, and, with landscape architecture and development, they would do a cool trail through it because we'd like to amenitize that whole green space. So that would include trails, that could include tot lots, that could include all different little program spaces along the way. But that actual wavy line that you're seeing is the drainage channel.
I think I was somewhat reading it the way Dr. Jones was as well. That path as it goes to the bottom right of the image, going off the property, kind of heading to the southeast, looks like it's heading to something. Is that the trail that may come down eventually to the number 2 ditch?
This is just showing the drainage.
Just
route.
drainage for now.
There isn't any plan for the trail to follow that. In theory, I think that could happen, but it's not planned at this time.
Because certainly the comprehensive plan and some of the things you highlighted talks about trails, connectivity, and multimodal, and yet I'm not sure I see that goal anywhere demonstrated in this plan, other than a maybe.
Once it got to the next level and you start lotting it out and more of the streets go in, there would be connectivity throughout the actual site plan itself. The road that goes through, the spine road that we like to call it, is equipped to have sidewalks, and that would be one form of connectivity. But of course there would be open space trails, and once the plan is actually lotted out and site plan, then that could have trails through it as well. So it was always an intent to have the connectivity, especially it was mentioned that there's a potential for a school site. Of course, we'd want to have great access to that, great ways to go there other than in a car. So we would encourage that type of good site plan.
I think since it's highlighted in your reference to the comprehensive plan, it ought to be certainly part of the goal. And the letter from RE4 was confusing to me. It seemed to say they wanted the land, but maybe they aren't going to build a school there, or they are? Or are they accepting, in fact, a deed to that 12-acre lot?
You're correct. The letter was a little confusing, and there has been a fair amount of back and forth dialogue with the school district, the applicant, and the town, trying to figure out what their needs are and making sure we're providing for those needs. I think the bottom line is the school site as shown is acceptable to them. It's large enough. When the property comes back to be platted with the subdivision process, at that time they would deed the property to the school district. I would also point out the school district's letter uses a lot of standard language that they put with every referral about they remain concerned about the volume of growth in Windsor and the challenges that poses to the district to keep up with facilities and things. So that wasn't unique to this proposal. That's a comment we consistently see from them.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? Mayor Pro Tem Bennett.
I was listening to my colleagues' questions about trail connectivity. That's obviously a big concern of ours. And my question is it too soon, or have you considered, as you put in your streets, bike paths, along with that, in terms of trail connectivity, have you considered, or is it too soon, looking at parcels PA 3 and PA 4, something through there that would connect to 257, because then people could travel south to the Poudre Trail even.
Yeah, I believe that's the intended route, with leaving it open-ended to when they come back with a more concrete proposal, but I believe the intended path would be somewhere along County Road 70 through this green space, and then along through these properties to connect. So it would connect 15 to 257.
Anything further? Any additional questions before we open up to the public?
I just had one
Okay,
quick.
Mr. Renmeyer.
That carve out that's on the far west side, is that the school property? Or is that a private residence that's not gonna be?
Another residence.
Oh, okay.
The school site's actually across from us.
The school site would be PA
Oh, I'm sorry, I thought
4.
it was on the west side. Sorry, I thought he said the west side of the property, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Sorry,
Any additional?
Mayor.
Okay, yes.
Just
Mr.
one more,
Sosnick.
and again, this may be, like Mr. Bennett's question, premature, but referencing to water, and whenever I see that, I always go, dual tap? Is it necessarily, it is dual tap? Okay, good.
It has to be.
Thank
Has
you.
to be, yes.
All future development has to follow that standard.
It's in the town's water surface area, so it'd be a dual tap. That's right.
Okay, good.
Okay. Okay, if there are no further questions from the town board, this is the public hearing. This is the opportunity, if anyone wished to address the town board on this agenda item, it would be time to come forward. State your name and address for the record, and then I think she'll start the timer, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
My name is Ronald Schnell, and I own a piece of property next to Mr. Windsor and south of, what is the lady's name? Lynn? But anyway, I own a piece of property, and it also has surface water rights. And I was wondering how this is going to affect those surface water rights on my property.
Is there somebody who can, Mr. Thornhill, do you want to try to answer? Or do you know? Do we know what they're talking about?
Eric Stadel, 9750 County Road 78, Fort Collins. I believe he's concerned about the current discharge that comes off our property to the south that eventually ends up in Lake Osterhut and then into, right. The plan does not increase or does not increase that runoff. So there's detention and retention upstream, but that water still has to go into Lake Osterhut.
Okay, all right. I guess that's.
Well, I know we have a well on the property that we don't use. Would it affect that at all? That wouldn't have anything?
No.
Okay, that's the question.
So, I don't remember whether I give my address or not. I live at 11248 West Progress Avenue in Littleton, Colorado.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But I do own that property
Yeah,
there.
okay, 33761 Highway
Rent it
257.
out.
Okay. Did you have any other?
No, that was it. I just wanted to see how.
Have it clear in our mind what
what was going on for sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Is there anyone else who wishes to come before the board? Yep, please step forward.
Jerry Windsor. Address is 33745 Highway 257. Just kind of wondering what the traffic pattern stuff, is there any talk of any stoplights or anything at 70 and 257 or?
Eric Steidel, 9750 County Road 78. In terms of traffic, when developer takes this to the next process, when we get into lotting and plotting, there'll have to be a traffic study conducted. I believe in the traffic master plan, Paul, correct me, if I believe 257 eventually turns into a 4-lane road. So whether that's a stoplight or a roundabout on 70, I don't know, that'd be a CDOT type question.
Part of the discussion that's going to be asked.
In the future process, yes.
Cool. Yeah, and any talk of speed limit changes by you
Well,
guys?
they will have to do a traffic impact study as part of their development as they get into this, and all of that kind of information will be addressed in that at that time.
Cool.
Is there anybody else who wishes to address the board during the public hearing? This would be the time. Okay? Seeing none, is there any final questions from the town board? Okay? If not, I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett to close public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on then to resolution number 2020-19. A resolution making certain findings of fact pursuant to section 31-12-110 Colorado Revised Statute concerning the Overland 368 annexation to the town of Windsor, Colorado. Legislative action. Mr. Hornback, anything further?
Mayor, I would just add that this resolution, the purpose of it's in the title of it, it's essentially establishing findings of fact that the proposal is in conformance with state statute regarding annexation. Nothing further beyond that.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Hornback? Okay. If not, is there a motion?
Madam Mayor, I move the board approve resolution number 2020-19.
Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Kozlowski with a second from Mr. Rennemeyer to approve resolution number 2020-19. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 4, ordinance number 2020-1602, an ordinance approving the Overland 368 annexation to the town of Windsor. First reading, legislative action. Mr. Hornbeck, anything further?
Nothing further.
Okay. Is there a motion from town board?
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2020-1602.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Doc Jones approving resolution, approving ordinance number 2020-1602. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 5, resolution number 2020-20, a resolution approving the Overland Master Plan. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck again giving presentation.
Thank you. And I have nothing further to add unless there's additional questions on the master plan.
Okay. Are there any questions concerning the master plan, Mr. Kozlowski?
Not so much a question, Mayor, but I did want to make a comment. You know, we sort of bundled up this slide presentation with both covering the annexation and the master plan, and I think there were enough concerns voiced about the connectivity in the master plan. Really didn't show a clear plan as to how this would in fact be friendly to multimodal and connectivity in terms of trail and walking trails, etc. So I guess I'm okay with approving this master plan as submitted, but I do hope that the message is clear that as this moves forward, that you really try to establish a connection to the regional trail system.
Okay. Any further comments or questions? Okay. If none, we have everything we need for the record so far, Mr. McCarter?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, go ahead.
Madam Mayor, I move to approve resolution 2020-20.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Dr. Jones with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett approving resolution number 2020-20. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the resolution passes unanimously. Moving on to item 6, a public hearing for ordinance number 2020-1603, an ordinance approving the Overland PUD overlay rezoning. Quasi judicial, Mr. Hornbeck will give presentation, but first I need a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker to open public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And public hearing is now open.
Madam Mayor, if I may.
Yes.
Sorry. And this item was addressed at the Planning Commission last Wednesday. So for the record, I'd like to point out that in my capacity as Town Board Liaison to the Planning Commission, I was present at the Planning Commission meeting during which this matter was previously presented. I wish to state that my participation in the Planning Commission proceedings has in no way influenced me in my capacity as a Town Board member this evening. I will make my decision, cast my vote this evening based solely on the evidence presented during this public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Hornbeck.
Thank you. This rezoning request has been reviewed in accordance with Article 5, Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. as a planned unit development or PUD zoning overlay. It's been also reviewed in accordance with the PUD regulations. The PUD regulations state in part that the intent is to provide flexibility in land planning and development, and also mentions well-related open space and recreational facilities. The site vicinity map, again, between State Highway 257 and 15th Street. The subject property is surrounded by largely undeveloped agricultural property with mostly single-family zoning surrounding the property. There are unincorporated Weld County parcels to the south of the property. The proposed PUD would allow for more intense residential development than is otherwise allowed by the municipal code. It allows for reduced lot sizes and reduced building setbacks to achieve that higher intensity. Despite that higher intensity, as mentioned earlier, the overall density of 4 units per acre still applies to the site in terms of meeting the land use plan and sewer capacity. So the higher density, higher intensity is essentially allowing for clustered higher density. And as a result, there is approximately 45 acres of open space and drainage ways, as well as the 12-acre school site. There are enhanced design criteria associated with the PUD that really focus on creating a high-quality public realm and streetscape. With the higher intensity development, these are important to really make sure the neighborhood functions properly and is well laid out. Some of the key requirements include standards for open space, requirements on front porches on homes, garage placement that minimizes the visual impact of those garages, a variety of home models to avoid repeated home models that create monotony, as well as staggered massing of homes to, again, create visual interest on the street. The proposal is in conformance with the objectives of the PUD zoning laid out in the municipal code, such as providing flexibility in land planning, encouraging unity and diversity in land development, creating a unified site development, preservation and enhancement of desirable natural landscape and other features. The proposal is also consistent with the further objectives of the PUD, such as relationship to the major transportation system. Again, the County Road 70 would extend through the site or just north of the site and provide access to 257 and 15th Street. The relation to utilities and community facilities, those utilities again would be extended at the responsibility of the developer. The general pattern of urban development, the PUD is in general compliance with the comprehensive plan and location in close proximity to the town core and town services. Proposal is also in conformance with the comprehensive plan, including the maintaining character of the community while accommodating growth that is fiscally and environmentally responsible. Again, close adjacent to the town core. It does support a diversity of housing types, promotes multimodal connectivity, and utilizes what is known as traditional neighborhood design with a focus on kind of neo-traditional design of the streetscape with things like porches and creating a more walkable environment. Again, diversity of housing types. And lastly, the application is consistent with the strategic plan, infrastructure, quality of life, and downtown. Notifications, again, were done in accordance with the municipal code. At their March 9th meeting, the Planning Commission forwarded to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the PUD zoning overlay, subject to any outstanding Planning Commission and staff comments being addressed.
Mr. Hornbeck, tonight's March 9th.
Thank you. Yeah, at their March 4th meeting, Planning Commission made that recommendation.
They were looking ahead.
Hey.
Staff requests the following be entered into the record: application, petition, supplemental materials, testimony received, staff memo, supporting documents, and recommendation. Again, the PUD review considerations that I went through just a moment ago are all listed before you, and that concludes my presentation.
Okay. Any follow-up questions, Mr.
Just one question, sorry if I missed this, Paul, but water and sewer are going to be accessed off of 15, County Road 15? Or 15th
I believe they would,
Street?
so water would come from, they need to create a looping system for water, so it would come off both 257 and 15th Street. And sewer would be extended from, it's in the vicinity of the Greenspire subdivision currently. It would be extended up in this direction.
Okay. Anything additional?
Oh, no,
Okay,
I'm sorry.
Mr. Sislavsky?
I thought you were,
I was.
I thought so.
Actually, just one question, because maybe it's too soon. This hasn't been platted out.
Correct, it has not been platted yet.
So do we know actual house densities, taking into consideration the green space?
Yes, it would be a maximum of 691 units.
How's that per acre?
4 units per acre.
It is,
Mhm.
okay.
Mr. Baker?
Oh, I'm gonna just, you touched on something earlier about the density. This isn't allowing for more units because they're limited by the sewer capacity, correct? This PUD is just allowing a different
It's
design?
allowing for smaller lot sizes, but you're correct, not
No more
any
units
overall
than-
higher density.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Good question.
Any additional questions from the town board before we open it up to the public? Okay, seeing none, this is the public hearing, and this is the opportunity for anyone who wish to come forward on this topic. This would be the opportunity and time to come forward. Is there anybody who wished to come forward during the public hearing? Okay, seeing none, any final questions from town board? Then I would seek a motion to close public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mr. Baker to close public hearing. All in favor, vote yes. Opposed, no. Public hearing is now closed. Moving on to item 7, an ordinance number 2020-1603, an ordinance approving the Overland PUD overlay rezoning. First reading, quasi-judicial. Mr. Hornbeck, anything further?
No, ma'am.
Okay. Anything further from the town board?
I have a question.
Yes, Mayor Pro Tem Bennett.
Do we know the approximate timeline for development?
I would ask the applicant to address any timeline.
Eric Steidle, 9750 County Road 78, Fort Collins. The current use of the subject property, we run a cow-calf operation and produce hay. My mother's been there for 22 years, and she's rapidly approaching 80 years old. So at some point, she would like to retire and move on and do something else. We don't really have an answer to that question specifically. We have been in contact with a number of both national and regional master developers and builders on the property, and they have reached out to our team for details as they come up with their proposal. It could be as soon as a year, but it could be a couple years in the out year. She would like to move on, but she's in no hurry to move on, so.
Thank you.
Any additional questions? Okay. If there are none, I believe we have what we need for the record, and I would seek a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve ordinance number 2020-1603.
Second.
A motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer with a second from Mayor Pro Tem Bennett approving ordinance number 2020-1603. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. And the ordinance passes unanimously. Moving on to item 8, a public hearing, ordinance number 2020-1604, an ordinance amending certain sections of Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. Legislative action, Mr. Hornbeck will give presentation, but first I would seek a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion on the floor from Mr. Rennemeyer and a second from Mr. Wilson to open the public hearing. All in favor vote yes, opposed no. Public hearing is now open.
Thank you. Mayor, before I get into the item, I want to pass out some public comments received by, or provided by Mr. Martin Lynn today. He asked that they be entered into the record, so I'll just share those with the board. So the ordinance before you tonight is part of a larger overhaul of chapters 15, 16, and 17 of the Municipal Code, collectively known as the Land Use Code. The current code is largely the original code that dates back to the 1970s, I believe. There have been piecemeal amendments over the years, but there has been no comprehensive overhaul done until now. The intent of this comprehensive update is to update existing zoning and subdivision regulations to more appropriately reflect contemporary design development practices, to provide options and flexibility in land development, as well as implement the goals of the comprehensive plan. The primary focus of tonight's ordinance is updating zone districts and their associated lot development standards. We have held 2 work sessions on the contents of this ordinance, March of last year as well as November of last year. Staff has also solicited input from the development community throughout this process and worked to incorporate their suggestions throughout the code. Again, the focus tonight is largely on the lot development standards, and other items we've discussed at recent work sessions that are not on tonight's agenda but will be updated in the future are things like the review process, review bodies of Planning Commission versus Town Board, as well as the subdivision section, which got into the pocket parks, neighborhood trails, things like that. So with that background, I'll get into the proposal before you tonight and give you a summary of the major changes. First of all, the code proposes a menu of development options whereby, especially for for residential uses, you have essentially a menu of options based on lot size as well as what type of access is provided to that lot. And that contrasts to our current code, which really is a one standard across the board. So this provides more flexibility to pursue different development types. As a part of that, the vehicle access standards are critical, in, especially when you get into smaller lot sizes. It really doesn't work on a 3,000 square foot lot for everyone to have a driveway and garage in the front. So when you get into those more intense development situations, the placement of garage, whether it's off an alley or street loaded, things of that nature, becomes more important. So we're introducing those standards. And then the RMU zone district, we currently have RMU. The code proposes to rename that RMU1 with very minimal changes to that, and introducing RMU2 as another option, which would allow for smaller residential lot sizes, and there would be additional requirements for additional parks, pedestrian-oriented design, as well as a minimum amount of commercial acreage, again with the idea that it is mixed use, so there would be some commercial associated with it. SF2 is currently a zone district we have that's not used anywhere in town. The proposal is to repurpose that to be similar to the RMU2, but it would be at a lower intensity without multifamily apartments or commercial. So it could be more of a transition between higher intensity apartments and existing neighborhoods. And then just to touch on density briefly, at our last work session, there were some questions about, is this allowing higher density? And just to make sure that's clear, the answer is no. The sewer is really the driving factor for density. So any development would need to be consistent with the sewer master plan, as well as the land use plan that sets single-family versus multifamily uses throughout the town and growth management area. The proposal would combine the estate zones. We currently have E1 and E2. This is really just trying to condense the code where possible, since there isn't a huge need to separate the two out, and septic would still be prohibited throughout town. Similar approach with multifamily of MF1 and MF2 being combined to just simply MF zone district. We would add an agricultural holding zone. The intent here is when a property annexes and they wish to remain agricultural for some time, we don't currently have a zoning that really allows that, so this would be a means to achieve that. It's not intended to provide or to really allow agricultural uses on a widespread basis throughout town. It's really for those large tracts that are currently farms and would stay that way. Residential rear setbacks are proposed to be increased. Currently it's 5 feet. This has been identified as potentially problematic when for example, when a rear addition is put on by your neighbor and they can come up to 5 feet to your rear yard. It's especially if it were a 2-story addition that can be rather close, and the 5 foot is somewhat unique to Windsor. Most communities are in the 10-foot or greater range for that, so we are proposing to increase that to 10 feet. Something that's really just trying to seek clarity in the code is the height and setback exceptions. The code is largely silent on that now. An example of setback exception would be an accessibility ADA ramp. If you follow the code, it would need to meet setbacks as it's considered a structure. So you'd have to be, for a single family home, for example, you'd have to be back 20 feet. It's often challenging and would sometimes require a variance. So we would allow those types of accessibility ramps. Other things, just calling out flagpoles, mailboxes, just trying to define what does and does not apply to setback requirements. Similar with height exceptions, things like church steeple, chimneys, elevator, bulkheads, things of that nature would not need to meet the maximum height requirements. And then the planned unit development zone district, we've tried to introduce additional criteria and kind of objective to make it more clear of when the PUD should be used and the intent, and just give the town board and planning commission more clarity on reviewing those applications. A fairly small addition is the requirement for parking surfaces. We receive occasional complaints from residents from neighbors who maybe have a front yard that's full of vehicles parked on gravel or dirt, and just complaints about the unsightly nature of that. We don't really have any code requirements on that currently, so we've introduced a requirement that generally you need to park on a paved driveway surface. Supplemental gravel parking is allowed in addition to that surface, with restrictions on the width and total amount of that gravel parking. So it's trying to minimize it and keep it adjacent to the driveway, so people still have an opportunity to provide that supplemental parking, but again, trying to minimize it. And then another change that's really come up recently with the reuse of the Dutch Brothers property. Was previously auto sales, and then with Pike's Auto moving out of the CB zone district, both of those being auto-oriented uses, while the intent of CB is really more for a downtown that's pedestrian and retail-oriented. So it's proposed that car sales and service would be no longer allowed in the CB district. And then lastly, we've added some definitions for things that were lacking definitions or for new terms that have been introduced. There are portions of the ordinance that remain largely unchanged from current code requirements, things like outdoor storage, parking ratios, allowed uses for the most part. Those are all left unchanged, and some of those will be addressed with future amendments. The Planning Commission did forward a recommendation of approval at their March 4th meeting. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Mr. Baker.
Thank you. On the RMU2 zone, it looks like we have schools, nursing and rest home, medical, dental, child care centers. And so with those uses on page 45 of your memo, oil and gas facilities are a conditional use. So potentially oil and gas facilities near child care centers and nursing care centers?
So the uses for RMU2 were largely copied from RMU1, and as mentioned, the intent wasn't to really change uses at this time. That would be a separate discussion. So that was the intent of the approach.
Okay. And also on page 45 of your memo, part CD, there is a conditional use of open or surface mining operations for the development or extraction of solid materials as defined in this chapter. What would that be?
Essentially gravel mining.
Gravel mining.
Yeah.
So that will be allowed next to homes and all these other uses as well?
Yeah, again, through the conditional use process, it could be allowed.
Okay. That's it.
Any additional questions? Mr. Soslowski.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I guess first, as I read through this pretty thoroughly, I commend you and your staff because this is a wonderful rewrite and very well organized and structured.
Thank you.
Where I ran into problems, and while we had 2 working sessions where we discussed these concepts at a somewhat high level, when the words are in front of you, I think on the first 3 pages even of your memo, I had 5 questions. As I started looking through the ordinance themselves, I had almost a question or a circle or a comment or a question mark on every page. I think this is extremely detailed. I'm a little concerned, especially as we now have this letter from Mr. Lind indicating that he didn't feel he had an adequate opportunity to provide developer input. So I guess I would prefer to have more time to look through this. Mayor, I'd like to propose that we leave this public hearing open, but postpone to a future date to continue the public hearing with the opportunity to have a more detailed work session with other stakeholders present to discuss the detail in here. And I think at the end of the day, it's very well done and it's very well structured. But I just hate to sweepingly approve so many pages of ordinances without having taken a cautious look at everything that's in there. I know, for instance, one little thing is the flagpole has to be as far away from your lot lines as it is tall. And if I take my 25-foot flagpole, it would end up in the middle of my house in order to meet those requirements. So I think there's little things like that we have to be careful before we just simply approve. So again, if I move at this point, make a motion to, again, leave the public hearing open to a future
But
date.
we would finish it and allow
Yeah,
the...
I would ask Mr. Soslowski if anybody from the public would like to make comments, if they came out tonight and had anything from the
Okay.
public hearing. So
Before
I would
we do
say, for the board, if you have any other questions for staff at this point, and certainly hear from the public, and then after that, I think the motion to continue would
Okay,
be.
sure, thank you.
Okay. Wait, are you done with your questions?
Well, no, my questions are.
Until we have the
Yes.
work session.
Yes.
Okay, Mayor Pro Tem.
Go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, and just a quick question in regards to Mr. Lynn's letter. Does staff want to address his concerns? What, did you talk to the development community, or are you pretty much on the same page with what he said, or do you?
I think that there's a disconnect there. I think there was outreach, but I don't know that we were as hands-on, you know, as maybe as we could have been. So we're going to look at that a little bit internally too, because, you know, I think from my standpoint, if we have staff saying, geez, we did the outreach and, you know, got comments, and we have the development community saying we didn't necessarily feel that we had that, I think we've just got to disconnect, and I think it's just a communication issue there. So I wouldn't dispute what he said. I also wouldn't dispute what Mr. Hornbeck said, that we did outreach. I just think that there's probably a good place for us to learn there and how we do the outreach in the future, make sure that, you know, we're doing some good qualitative outreach and taking our time with that.
Okay.
So in recognition of that, my recommendation would be, I mean, this particular subject matter in front of us is 342 pages long.
Mm-hmm.
If you think a developer is going to like read through that and really, I mean, I would specifically have a memo attached to that specifically highlights very significant changes that are occurring within or sections that they should pay close attention to, rather than just here it is and expect the expectation that they're going to be able to read through all that.
Well, if they're going to complain about it, they should read it in advance.
And Mayor, if I can address that and give a little more background on what outreach we did do. We shared the initial draft with the development community, and that was largely our, I guess, most frequent developers and their consultants. That was shared with them early last year. We received input really just from one consultant, Norris Design, who's Water Valley Land Company's planner. We worked with them to had a really productive meeting and taking their suggestions into the draft, sent them a second draft as well as the rest of the development community, and again got some feedback from Norris, sent them additional feedback with where we have incorporated their changes or suggestions, where we were unable to do so, where it was really just a difference of opinion or difference of approach, explaining to them why we had that difference of opinion or our rationale behind it. So we have worked closely with that group, and at the previous work session there was a memo that did detail, you know, comparison side by side of all the big high level changes, and that was shared with the development community as well.
But here's why we have the problem.
I'm not disputing that there's a problem.
Because we even have town board members who don't even recall having these discussions, is because we discussed these over a year ago in March 2019, and then November 2019, and now we're just talking about it, trying to finalize it today. And I know that's the world, I've been here 10 years, so now I realize that's the world of government, but perhaps government needs to learn how to do things a little bit better, because you can't expect folks to maintain conversations that have been had a year ago or even 4 months ago, because we're on to the next subject matter, and then the next subject matter, and then the next subject matter. And especially something as important as this. I mean, I think if we have these lapses that happen, perhaps before they come back before the board, we at least need a refresher course, not only for us, but maybe for all the key stakeholders, to say, hey, we're here to remind you that we did this, and here's what was said, because now we are going to have, or we are going to, I mean, we've got some board members who do want to have an additional work session. But I know Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Ben, I believe, has some, did you have all your questions answered, Mr. Baker, or did you have additional questions?
One comment about a future work session, which I'm not opposed to, it would be a good refresher. I'm not sure we need all the development community to come and hash this out. That sounds like a really long meeting. I'm wondering if maybe staff can meet with the development and then...
In a separate...
Yeah, and then they can maybe just bring us the big concerns. That would be my suggestion.
Okay. Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Yeah, I'm just going to limit a couple of questions. Refresh my memory on the advantage of combining MF1 and MF2.
The thought process is there's really not a good reason to have the two zone districts, so just in an effort to compress the code and make it easier to use of combining those two. There is really no clear distinction in the code of when or where the different zones should be used, as well as what type of development is appropriate in one versus the other.
Okay, MF2 did not allow a greater density than MF1.
It does allow that greater density. That's really the only difference. And it's never really come up to my knowledge where there's been a development proposal where MF1
I
versus...
just want to understand. So if we combine it, that means what would have been an MF1 could have the same density that an MF2 could have had.
Right.
I'm not complaining, but I'm just trying to understand. Okay, along the density thing, part of the intent of this, I think, is to allow smaller lots, which gives flexibility, and the trade-off is open space, but smaller lots would imply higher density. But I'm just clarifying what I heard you say. That's also going to be limited by the sewer capacity. Am I correct in that?
Correct. So sewer would always be a limiting factor, and there's a requirement for additional open space, kind of in exchange for that higher density.
For the concept. Yeah. Okay. I also had a question about the flagpole, but that's a little thing. Okay. The setbacks. I remember we talked about that, going from 5 to 10 feet in a number of cases. What was the reaction of the development committee or home builders?
The initial proposal, I believe, was higher than 10. There was some concern that increase could limit their development opportunities. I think this is somewhat of a compromise. It was originally 15 feet was the proposal. We scaled it back to 10 as kind of a middle ground.
And I did skim all 300 and some pages. I read in detail the first 120, so I don't have everything in my hand. I support the idea of having work sessions just so we can be certain before we move forward. I think there was some provisions in there that if a 10-foot setback, which I think is a good idea, but I think there were some provisions for some exceptions to that if there were extenuating circumstances.
Well, there is a section that allows for essentially front setback averaging. So if you're it'd be particularly relevant in the core of town where there is more diversity in where houses are on the lots. You could take that average of those lots.
Okay.
That may be what you are referring to.
Okay, maybe, yeah. And I'll just limit one more thing. Parking services, I understand that. I don't think this gets into building code, does it?
Parking services, no.
And this is the land use, so it's not going to address building code. And my question is, I think I know the answer, but is there anything, I'm trying to limit this to a public hearing. Is there anything in this that would address the problem we've had in some neighborhoods where driveways within a year have dropped an inch or two? I think it has to do with probably surface preparation, I don't know. But does this address that problem that we're seeing in some neighborhoods?
This does not address
get into
that.
the building code?
I'm not sure if that's even a building code issue. I know
That's a warranty issue with the home builder. That's not, I don't know if there's a code
Okay,
fix.
just want to be certain. Thank you.
Okay, anybody else?
So,
Okay, Mr. Wilson?
no, I think it sounds like the majority of the town board would like to push out. If that's the will of the board, that's fine. Just to defend town staff a little bit, I think you guys did do some outreach. Maybe we could look to do a little bit better next time. But I think the outreach was there. And, one person reaching out at 2 o'clock on the day of the meeting, that concerns me as well, to be able to table something. Here we are in March, we have an election coming up. We push this out. We're gonna have 3 new people up here pretty soon. And we've been talking about this for a year. It's been on our agenda for a long time. And I think many times the development community knows things before I do. And so I don't know that they've been kept in the dark completely. So that's my 2 cents, but if it's the will of the board, we'll push it out, but I prefer that we didn't.
All right, and Mr. Wilson, if I may, Mayor, I'd just say that I'm looking at our future meeting agenda, and I believe on April 6th, we have a clear meeting right now, so that would still be this board. It'd be a chance to, I think, for us to circle back one more time with the development community. I think it'd be a chance for us to bring to the board and say, here are the 3 places where staff may disagree with the development community, but here they are.
Okay.
And let the board kind of wrestle through those ideas. And then, again, if after that discussion, if you're ready to go, we could put it on an upcoming meeting and this board could adopt it.
We've
If it-
actually got a work session scheduled next week. The intent was for the subdivision standards, but we
Okay.
can certainly bump that
Well,
to
yeah.
April, and if we want to.
Yeah, I guess my only concern is if there's a question from the development community about the outreach.
Sure.
I don't know if we want to say in 6 days, we'll have that answer, but,
That works for me, Shane. Thank you.
okay. Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Renmeyer?
I just wanted to ask staff, is there some way, given Mr. Lynn's overall theme here, is there some way that we can find out, because we've dealt with this over the 4 years I've been on the board, which is the whole development community not being aware of what's going on necessarily. And I'm not saying that that happened in this case particularly, but it's the concern, especially of maybe this board as well as the board from 2+ years ago, that that the developing community be involved, and be given due process or due invite to be present, etc. Is there some way that you can, at our work session, say, hey, this is when a bulk email went out, or this is who we met with, this is when, etc., just so that the board knows that due consideration's been given, not just to Mr. Lynn, but to all of the other developers that we use as well.
And so if I can repeat what you said, so I understand. So you're just saying if we could, instead of just saying we reach out to the development community, say this is how we reached out to the development
Like a
community.
mass email went out on this date, a year ago, and then in October, in preparation for another work session, we sent out another, just so that we can see. I mean, I'm sure we've got the archives of
Sure.
who was notified and when, et cetera, just so we can, that's what I'd prefer. I don't know, I'd like to know that, the whole development community was involved, not that they weren't. I just want to have that as a matter of reference.
Sure. I think we could add that detail. That's easy enough to do.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any final questions from the board before we
Just
open it
one
to
along
public?
those same lines. Paul, when you notify the development community, you just like attach this whole thing to an email and say, take a look, or how does it work?
The emails that have been sent have included a cover memo giving an explanation similar to what you have received, of explanation of what's changed, as well as the whole ordinance.
The whole thing as well?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to add one more thing. When we first started the code update back in 2016 and we had a consultant, the consultant was also meeting with the development community, but on a one-by-one basis. So they were meeting with different groups separately and going through an interview process. And that happened between 2016 and 2018.
Any other questions from
That's
the
what
board?
covers it. Yeah.
Okay. Then this is a public hearing, so if there's anybody who wished to address the board on this item, this would be the time to come forward. Okay. Seeing none, then I think it would be time for your motion.
Now I get to say
Mr.
everything I said.
Sosnowski.
And I really continued to look at my notes as we were discussing this. And you're right, Mr. Hornbeck, clearly some of the language in here remains from the existing ordinances. I sat at home with this open here and the current ordinances here, and I tried to go back and forth. The problem is you have Article 1, Section 16.1 now is all of your various zone districts. In the old, the 6.1 is just the purpose of our zoning. So it was very hard. This section on zoning districts was in Article 3, Section 16.3, and other sections were in Article 7. And I was just jumping all over the place trying to see what changed, what didn't. I found blocks of text that were the same, but I found blocks of text that were new or different or changed. And I could not pull it all together enough to say, is this a good set of ordinances that are going to be pragmatic and applicable? So that's again why and I guess now I will make the motion to extend this public hearing to a later date. And in the interim, hopefully have a little more detailed deep dive work session to have you guide us through exactly the language in the ordinances.
Okay.
So moved. Second.
We have a motion on the floor from Mr. Sosnowski and a second from Mr. Mayor Pro Tem Bennett, keeping the public hearing open to a date to be determined. All in favor vote yes, opposed no.
Closed it. Oh,
Mr. Bennett?
Thank you.
Mr. Sosowski?
And the motion passes 6-1, the yeas being Baker, Bennett, Melendez, Redemeyer, Jones, Sislavsky, and the nays being Wilson. Do we have to officially close the public hearing then too with the motion, or this motion kind of took care of that? Because we're extending it to a date to be determined, is that correct?
It remains open until we bring it back.
Okay. So then, moving on to item D, communications from our town attorney.
I'm sorry. I think we have to address item 9.
So we still have item 9 that has not been specifically addressed on the record, so I would suggest a motion to postpone that indefinitely as well.
Okay.
Madam Mayor, I move that we approve, I move that we postpone to indefinitely ordinance number 2020-1604.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor to postpone item 9, ordinance number 2020-1604. All in favor, we have a first and a second, correct?
Yes.
Okay, all in favor vote yes, opposed no. And again, that motion passes 6-1, the yeas being Baker, Bennett, Melendez, Redemeyer, Jones, Sislavsky, and the nays being Wilson. Now, with that, communications from our town attorney.
Just that we have an executive session this evening.
Okay. Communications from town staff, anything further from anyone? Okay. Communications from our town manager.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out that the monthly Invisio report for our strategic plan is in your packet, and so if you have any questions, please send them my way.
Okay. Communications from town board. Communications. So just a couple of things. I want to remind folks that March 17th, we have a candidate forum hosted by the League of Women Voters. It is at the Community Rec Center. Doesn't have the time here.
5:30 to 7:30.
5:30 to 7:30. Reminder that dish and dessert is March 26th at the Windsor Lake Coffee House. That is just an opportunity for folks who want to come and have conversation with the mayor and those town board members who are present, a non-agenda item and just an opportunity to come and ask questions. And we are changing our final, our coffee with the mayor this month. Instead of the third Saturday of the month, it is happening on the last Saturday, March 28th, 2020. Coffee with the mayor will be at Coffee House 29, starting at 7:30 to 9. So those are just a couple of reminders. And with that, I would seek a motion to move into our executive session.
Madam Mayor, I move that we move into executive session pursuant to Colorado Revised Statute 24-6-402, subsection 4, subsection B, to confer with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions concerning Brinkman exclusive negotiation agreement.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion on the floor from Mr. Redemeyer with a second from, was that Mr. Sislavsky? Okay, all in favor vote yes, opposed no. We will take a 5-minute recess and then move into executive session.